Greetings. Thanks for having me with you today. Wah, 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 water. This shattered and shattering cry opens Norbesi Phillips' song, which confronts the infamous 1781 massacre of 150 captured Africans off the coast of present-day Jamaica. While some of the slave ship's human cargo died for want of water, scores of others were drowned, thrown alive into the sea by the captain and crew with a view to recouping their monetary value as insured property. As Philip begins to trace in the notanda that follows the poems, what we're concerned with here are two kinds of craft: the Zong slave ship and Zong the poetry cycle, her experiment in creative fabulation, using speculation, language, and literary form to grapple with the ineffable trauma of the Middle Passage journey. Here are some of her notes. A novel requires too much telling. Like Captain Collingwood, I am now fully launched on a journey. She realizes in 2001 that to not tell the tale that must be told, I employ a variety of techniques. She calls grammar an ordering, but a violent and necessary ordering. July 12, 2002. All the poems, need a great deal of space around them, as if they need to breathe. Notice then that Philip is inventing a craft, a poetic craft that can convey the aporia of the event. The Zong case reminds us that the history of the Caribbean is predominantly one of involuntary travel and travel under pressure, in the hold of slave ships, in the belly of precarious boats, fleeing hardships or hurricanes, seeking employment or sexual freedom. The reality of Caribbean travel is therefore a far cry from the motives of tourist travels to the region's shores and from the travels that populate science fiction. Indeed, science fiction can be broadly defined as an adventure story, a romance of predominantly white male exploration of the unknown with the aid of scientific and technological expertise, invention, or gadgetry. But as Junot Diaz famously asserted, if I'm powering the ship at a lower frequency, I'm going to have a say in how it's used and in what ports of call it stops. I offer for your consideration 3 Caribbean speculative novels that grapple with the Middle Passage, crossing in striking ways. Although they evoke tropes familiar to space operas and sci-fi time travel narratives, these novels upend and creolize what qualifies as spaceships and time machines. They imagine futuristic transport that draws on Afro-Caribbean myths and culture, and that provisionally heals the historical and ongoing traumas of crossing the Black Water. Their characters engineer crafts by which to travel to new, potentially liberatory spaces, whether outer space or new geographies or even inner spaces, states of consciousness that restore the Black body and soul. Nala Hopkins's Midnight Robber makes explicit the connection between Afrofuturistic space travel and crossing the Atlantic by slave ship. In the novel, centuries hence, Caribbean people have set off in spaceships powered by the nanotechnology of a sentient Afro-Caribbean AI who delivers them to a galaxy she also terraforms through Caribbean music to be a sanctuary for Black and brown life. This journey thus realizes Lee Scratch Perry's vision of an African starship with Marcus Garvey as the designer and the dub engineer himself as ship captain. Although the fictional Black Star Line 2 positions itself as a successor to the doomed real-world shipping company, it does not materialize the Back to Africa hopes of Jamaican-born race leader Marcus Garvey, with Back to Africa, of course, being a geographic orientation that still informs the spiritual quest of Jamaican Rastafarians. While the one run aground, the other transports this Creole citizenry to a new kind of freedom, forward in time and in the stars. It is this version of the ship that heals the traumas of the historical journey by sea ship, not a rocket ship, with them Black people inside, lying pack up, head to toe in their own shit, with chains round them ankles. Let the child remember how Black people met this crossing as free people this time. If Garvey's mode of Black transport was a ship, a rememory and reversion of the trajectories of the slave ship, Hopkinson reimagines the Black Star Line as musical arc and phenomenological spaceship, in a nod to Perry's Black Arc Studio and the space-time rearranging reggae and dub soundscapes he created there. But healing the traumas of the slave ship and the plantation doesn't always mean travel to outer space. Werner Bradbury's The Rainmaker's Mistake remains grounded on Earth, a speculative double to real-world Jamaica. The titular Rainmaker, the leader of a group of African adventurers, tries to recover his power over water after his people are tricked into enslavement by pale-eyed, pale-skinned men who exert control over the Africans' bodies by surgically altering their biological clocks. Post-emancipation, once the community claimed new space for themselves away from the plantation grounds, space itself becomes a tool for futuristic fabulation, giving rise to a wonderful, inventive Caribbean version of special relativity and the twin paradox. With their bodies as de facto time machines, members of the community travel to alternate geographies, space-time coordinates, in fact, known as the past, the future, the pluperfect, and the norm. And they do so in rudimentary crafts built by their own hands and ingenuity. Our primary narrator, Queenie, zips to and from the norm in a kayak she crafts from a tree trunk. London travels by boat down the narrow seaway to and from the future to trade for modern gadgets and amenities, while Essex flies to and from the past in a seaplane he crafts with Creole engineering skills. One minute he's talking about making a propeller from 4 lengths of palm tree bark tied together with a piece of stick, and we're sure this cannot be a proper plane. The next minute, he's sourcing and smelting bauxite into aluminium, and soon he's taking off from the Palisades, a fictional space much like the airport in real-world Jamaica. Bradbury's fabulation dimension shifts the travels of Caribbean boat people, fleeing persecution or climate change, desperate for food or freedom. They often set out from Haiti or Cuba in makeshift rafts or precarious boats across some of the most treacherous passes of the Atlantic, trying to reach mainland America. Many do not survive. In Rainmaker, it is Black intellect, ingenuity, and communal inquiry that eventually conveys the fictional community to the space they really want to get to, which Queenie calls the free. Bradbury suggests that full free, true emancipation, is itself a space-time coordinate, not just a condition. Rainmaker naturalizes space and time travel to suggest that the desirable Afrofuture of leisure, rest, and freedom is not mainland America, but it's here now on what Hopkinson calls the dub side, accessible by a shift in consciousness. Building on this notion of mental shift, my final example is Karen Lord's The Galaxy Game, a novel set in the future and a faraway galaxy. And like canonical space operas, it features suborbital travel, spaceships, even wormholes that connect the cluster of homeworlds. And the novel centers around the geopolitical conflict over who gets to control galactic transit. In addition to dimension shifting the exile experience of those who had to flee Montserrat in the wake of the eruption of Soufriere in 1995, this fictional intergalactic geography maps to the real-world Caribbean as an archipelago of island states and a few coastal continental states connected or disconnected by the sea and colonial histories. And while technically reachable by boat travel, in reality, the travel from even one neighboring island to another often means flying to the US mainland or to mainland France and back. Lord dimension shifts this reality to outer space, where planets and their satellites are disconnected by both vast reaches of space and politics. But she invents a form of travel she calls a mind ship, a kind of human animal cyborg craft. The main character, Rafi, belongs to a post-human race with psionic ability, one application being the ability to push thoughts into the minds of others. And as he develops his gift to pilot a mass transit system based on the mindship dynamic. The nexus, the term for both the web and the pilot, connects a group of people to a common goal, in this case, to put other humans in stasis to transport them across the galaxy with his mind. Think of the nexus as a kind of organic passenger module, Rafi explains. A single nexus can take a few people through a transit, but for a larger group, we would need a kind of ecosphere. We're creating a collective consciousness, a temporary colony organism. That makes it easier to hold everything together when traveling. The collective travel of the Nexus obviously evokes captured Africans shackled together in the hold of slave ships, while the numbing effect of Mindship transit calls to mind the psychic toll of the Middle Passage journey, the devastation of self, memory, history. But beyond being volitional, both forms of Afrofuturistic travel and galaxy game enable post-human Caribbean peoples to return to native lands, even those destroyed by intergalactic ethnic cleansing. Instead of slave ship or steamship, they travel by mindship. Back to Africa becomes back to Sadira, to sink your bare feet in the soil of the homeworld and imagine that soil sustaining life and waters healed and refreshed once again, even if another tomorrow. Now, these are just a few examples of novels by Afro-Caribbean women writers that imagine future healing journeys and forms of transit, and that model new ways to move and be in the world. Caribbean Afrofuturistic travel is never purely a romantic adventure or escape from the real. Not the least since in these stories, the capitalist, colonialist, and oppressive regimes that undergird travel in the Caribbean real, in fact, pursue us beyond Earth and to the future. In the same way that the text of the Gregson v. Gilbert insurance case becomes the mother text from which Philip architects a recovery of Black life, in these speculative novels, the real is the very fabric from which to craft the Afrofuture. But dispensing with techno-scientific gadgets, mechanical spaceships, and time machines, Hopkinson, Bradbury, Lord, and others engineer narrative crafts to steer their readers to an imagined future. Word building is not only world building, it is, as Rafi terms it, real transit. Thank you so much.